We estimate that as much as 7 million tons of counterfeit sandpaper is being smuggled into the country each year. Most are falsely labeled and dangerous to users. To combat this, a Sandpaper Regulatory Taskforce was created. It's our job to ensure the country has a safe sandpaper supply. I'm part of the Sandpaper Regulatory Taskforce. Our job is to clamp down on illegal counterfeit sandpaper. For sandpaper to be sold in this country, it needs to be certified by the Coated Abrasive Manufacturers Institute, also known as CAMI. It's becoming a big problem. We are seeing a huge uptick in counterfeit sandpaper being sold online. Now it's starting to even be found in large home improvement stores, such as Lowe's and Home Depot, so it's really getting out of hand. It seems that organized crime has gotten into the sandpaper game. We are seeing shady organizations manufacturing sandpaper with little care for the grit count or cardstock used. They never pay to have their product certified because they know they would never pass inspection. So a lot of the sandpaper they're producing is very dangerous. 100 grit needs to be 100 grit. A few extra grit or a few less grit can make a very large difference. Sandpaper is classified as abrasive aggregate per square inch. So for 100 grit sandpaper, that means there is 100 pieces of aggregate per square inch. What we are starting to see now that counterfeit sandpaper is starting to flood the market, sandpaper labeled as 100 grit will often have 97 pieces of aggregate per square inch, and sometimes can have even as much as 106 pieces of aggregate per square inch. So it's not true to the label. These small differences may not sound like much, but they can be catastrophic to users, and in some cases even fatal. I was speaking to a local contractor the other day, and he's been having a real hard time finding a reliable sandpaper supplier, one that sells authentic sandpaper.
Yeah, getting a hold of sandpaper these days has been mighty difficult, you know. Go to a supplier there, they got nothing in stock, and I'm like, well, what do you got? And they're like, well, we got this, but it's just marked up at least 200% and more than it needs to be, right? So I've been having trouble with my clients, right? And I give them the bill there, and they take one look at it, and they go, what's this extra add-on charge here? And I go, that's for the sandpaper. They say, well, what do you mean? And I say, well, have you seen the prices of sandpaper now? And they go, no, it's sandpaper, it shouldn't be that much. And I said, oh, last week it wasn't. But now it's gone up so much, right, that 50% of the bill is sandpaper, and my clients aren't happy. And, you know, I say, you want this fancy house with your exposed beams and all that, and if they're not willing to pay it, I'm going to have to take it down. So I recently lost this bid on a complex job because I quoted them $8 million for just to cover the sandpaper charges. So, of course, in the end I didn't get the job, and I knew the guy that did, and I know very well he's going to be using that counterfeit sandpaper. I'll tell you right now, that paint ain't going to stick to the wall, and he's going to have lots of problems.
We are taking this very seriously. We are conducting sting operations. We want to uncover this web of counterfeit sandpaper. Who are the groups producing this? Who's buying it? What crime groups are linked in? Because this needs to stop. This is getting out of hand. It's getting dangerous. You know, people are dying. Here he comes. Okay. We weren't waiting long before someone came to pick up the package. Wait, that was Flannel Guy. What's he doing here?
I don't know, but I thought he worked for Sanchez.
Yeah, Dwayne's been following him for weeks.
Dwayne? Oh, yeah, Tim was telling me about that case.
Oh yeah, I was at Tim's wedding last weekend.
No way. Who did he marry this time?
Emily.
No, like
Yeah.
Emily from 7-Eleven?
Yeah, Emily from 7-Eleven.
No way, that dirty dog. I bet he's in it for the free coffee.
Your words, not mine.
So they are. But hey, we got a case to solve. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm so cold. Finding out that Flannel Guy was a part of this was a huge help to our investigation. He is part of this larger crime group, and we were a little bit on the fence whether they were involved in counterfeit sandpaper production, but now we can say they are, which really helps out our case. This can be the hard part. We will spend weeks or months gathering information, working with informants, only to have the judge just deny our warrant request. For some reason, a lot of the judges don't seem to think counterfeit sandpaper is a big deal. It would really help if we had some more pushback from the public, but most of them are unaware of the threats posed by counterfeit sandpaper, and a lot of them don't even know it exists. So that is why we have started working on some PSAs to better help educate the public.
This sandpaper feels kind of funny. Wait, this doesn't feel like 40 grit. This is 39.
Counterfeit sandpaper is dangerous. Don't stand by and let it happen to you. To find out if your sandpaper is safe and to get all the facts, go to sandpaper.srt.org.
Get this, right? So I'm on site, working away there, and I see this guy come up on site. So I says to the guy, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm the framing inspector." And I say, "Framing inspector? Well, can't you see we got both walls here boarded up? Like we already had our framing inspection done." And then he kind of was like, "Oh, right." And so I said, "This ain't the right site. Get out of here." So I go back to my desk, right, and I see that the sanding disc from my palm sander is missing. So I think to myself, that cheeky little guy must have had a buddy to come in and swoop it up as he was distracting me. So I've been looking into importing sandpaper from other countries, right, and I've been thinking Dubai might be a good place to start because they got lots of sand, so they must have a sandpaper factory out there. So I looked them up on the old interwebs, and sure enough, they do. And they actually were having a sale on Gator that day. So, I ordered up a bunch of crates of that stuff, and we should be getting our delivery by Friday.
So the police have raided the house and secured the area, so now it's our job to come in and collect some samples that we can take back to our lab. This has got to be one of the largest operations I've ever seen. In this one room alone, I'd estimate there's about $400,000 worth of counterfeit sandpaper. It looks like we called them just in time because they wrapped everything up and it looks like they were going to ship it out really soon.
Nice, a Timbit.
Whoa, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. It could be contaminated by the sandpaper.
Yeah, you're right.
You may be thinking this sandpaper looks quite convincing, and you'd be correct. The sandpaper here is not counterfeit, it's the sponge that's counterfeit. This is not how you write 180 grit. I've been dealing with so much counterfeit sandpaper that I can tell you the grit count just purely off of feel, and I tell you, this is not 80 grit sandpaper. This feels more like 73 grit, so we're gonna put this in our evidence bag and take it back to the lab. The lab is our biggest asset. It helps us expose the techniques used by the counterfeiters. We are often able to identify specific materials that will give us locations or suppliers that are used by the counterfeiters. Last month, we took down a large operation working out of a laundromat. We were starting to notice that a lot of our counterfeit sandpaper samples were contaminated with small cotton fibers, the kind you'd typically find in dryer lint. Here we are at the lab where we examine our sandpaper samples. As you can see, it's a pretty small lab, but we don't exactly have the largest budget, but we make it work. One of the best ways to tell if sandpaper is counterfeit is by marking a 1-inch square on our sample. What we're going to do is we're going to count all the grit inside the black lines of the square and see how many grits there are. So for this piece, it says 80. So in theory, there should be 80 pieces of aggregate within this square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. So this piece of sandpaper only has 73 pieces of aggregate within this square. It should be 80. We will then record this data on our evidence form. I've just cut off a small piece of our sample which we can send to get its mineral composition. Mineral composition helps us out a lot when it comes to finding out the location of where they're getting their aggregate. Maybe there's some minerals that are more common to a certain area that can narrow down our search even more. This can really help us find out where these counterfeit organizations are sourcing their materials from. Because of the legality of the situation, a lot of this evidence is often used in court, so we have to make sure we are very thorough with our paperwork and that none of it gets lost. Now we can turn our attention to the sanding sponges. We didn't used to see sanding sponges, it was mostly just sandpaper, but it seems that the counterfeiters are experimenting with new items. It always worries me when I see that the counterfeiters are adapting and creating new products, because I start thinking like, well, one day are we going to end up with counterfeit belt sanders or like counterfeit steel wool? Like, where does it end? It could get really bad, and it makes me kind of worried, you know? So for this sanding sponge here, I think we have a prototype, because they have used authentic sandpaper to wrap the sponge. The sponge part is what's counterfeit, which is kind of strange. As you can see, they wrote 180 on it, which is not how you write 180 grit. So this tells me that the counterfeiters haven't quite figured out how to make sanding sponges yet, because they have used authentic sandpaper to wrap the sponge. I think eventually they're going to move to where this sandpaper here is counterfeit as well. So I think that is why we only found a small amount of these. They weren't actually mass producing them. They were maybe showing them to different suppliers and seeing, you know, hey, can you make this, or can you make sandpaper that will bend in this way? So I think this is a proof of concept. So let's look closer at this sanding sponge under the microscope. Yep, that is authentic sandpaper. It's 3M sandpaper. I recognize the aggregate construction. This place kind of reminds me of your old apartment.
Like when Dave and I lived together?
Yeah, what's Dave up to now?
Oh, I think he works at the cemetery.
Kind of like a dead-end job, if you ask me.
Yeah, I guess you got that right.
Oh, the other day, I saw this ghost. I was walking down the office corridor, just tripped over for no reason. I wasn't even wearing laced shoes. I had Velcro ones on.
Like the ones you had on the Christmas party that
Yeah,
time?
those exact ones, yeah.
The night that you drank 45 margaritas.
45 margaritas. Come on, who said it? It was 15. Who told you that?
Oh, Steve the bartender.
Steve the bartender exaggerates everything. 45?
Yeah, I
No
guess
way.
that is a bit much.
Yeah, that's way too much.
That's a bit much for you.
15, come on. I don't know what's worse, that Steve the bartender thought I drank 45 margaritas, or that Clifford believed him. I will give Clifford the benefit of the doubt. He is new to this task force. But Steve, like, what the hell, man? 45 margaritas? That's not even possible.
Yeah.
As I get up,
tell me more about
as
the
I
ghost.
get up, the cloud of like the ghost just kind of like floats right in front of me, you know? Like imagine
Yeah.
Casper the ghost, but like without the face. Like there's no face, but it's just like right in front of me.
Huh. Wait, were you at the office?
Yeah,
Oh,
office
probably-
corridor. Yeah.
That must have been Pammy's vape smoke.
No. It didn't smell like watermelon bubblegum at all.
Sounds like that fall you had's gone to your head.
No, come on. We got a case to solve. Let's get going.
Yeah, you're right.